If you're moving to GA4 from GA Universal, you might be wondering, where are my views? Because that is where you would, for example, filter out internal traffic. In GA4, instead we have data filters, which aren't as flexible as filters were in GA Universal, but they're still useful, and frankly, they're all we've got right now. Your GA4 property comes with one data filter by default, which you can see here for internal traffic. You can currently have up to 10 filters per property, and there are two types available: internal traffic and developer traffic. You cannot delete filters once they are created. You can only set them to inactive, so be really careful when you're creating them. Here's what that internal filter looks like, the one that's set up by default. Let's go over the different options. Filter operation options are exclude or include only. If you have several include only filters, they will all be applied at the same time and will be applied before any exclude filters. So keep that in mind if you use this option. You'll see here that the traffic type parameter name isn't editable, so you will need to use Google's parameter naming, but you can change the value if needed, which can be useful if you're setting up several traffic type filters. For example, if you have different types of internal traffic, you could create more than one filter. As you can see here in this example, there's a filter for office traffic and another for in-store traffic as an example. Lastly, we have the filter state, which has three options: testing, active, and inactive. Make sure to test your filters before setting them to active, because there is no way to access this data in the future once it is filtered out. The data is gone and you cannot get it back. You want to test before you set it live. You can see how well your filters are working in GA4 itself by clicking the Add Comparison button in any report. Then, in the Build Comparison area that comes out of the right side of the screen, find the Test Data Filter Name dimension, then select the filter that you want to see. Then you can see if your filter is working as expected. Now, how can you add this traffic type parameter to your internal traffic? If this is an app data stream, you'll need to append this manually using the SDK. If it's a web stream, you can either append it based on IP address or using another method in Google Tag Manager. To append via IP address, open your data stream, click More Tagging Settings, then click Define Internal Traffic, then click Create to add in the IP addresses that you want to filter out. Note that if you're using multiple traffic type values, you can also edit that here. But what if people are working from home and therefore have IP addresses that change regularly? There's a very simple way to do this using Google Tag Manager. Add a new URL query variable to your GTM container. In this example, I have set the query to be traffic type, but you could call this parameter really anything you wanted. Then in your GA4 configuration tag, add in a new field in the Fields to Set section called traffic type, with the value being the new URL query variable that you just created. When people visit your site, make sure they've added this parameter to the end of their URL, like so. In this example, I've set the traffic type to store, and you can see here in the debug view that it's picked up successfully by GA4. Of course, this does depend on your team remembering to do this, but it's a lot easier to do than resetting IP addresses constantly. Now, you should be able to use filters to properly filter your GA4 data.